May then take your losses to Bangalore water supply itself directly. Volume 1, it's volume 1. Volume A, is it? 1A. 1A. We have set out the issues with Bangalore water supply itself framed in paragraph 23 of its opinion.
What is that?
Page 29. Page 29. This is paragraph 23 of Bangalore water supply, which is at page 25 of volume 5B. I thought for the convenience sake.
Paragraph 37 are you referring to?
Yes.
That's right, 37.
Yes.
Of Bangalore water supply.
No, is that paragraph 37 of volume 1A?
My written submissions, no.
The written is written submission. Reproduced.
Your lordships also may, alongside, keep the judgment compilation, which is volume 5B, but I'll be probably reading between my submissions and Bangalore water supply concurrently. That para 23 is at page 25 of the judgment compilation, which is volume 5B.
Yes.
I have extracted here only for convenience. That's
We are around.
If your lordships also, I said, keep open page 25 of volume 5E for a minute before I read these issues. Because almost every page of Bangalore water supply has some beautiful literature and something which goes far into our visionary thinking as well as the problem which the court encountered.
Has to be read along with the dictionary.
I mean, we cannot close our eyes and mind to the masterpiece of literature available in judgments, and they are so instructive and also guide us in ways of thinking in unknown and novel ways. I want to read paragraph 22 at page 25 before I take out of the issues. Page 22 of volume 5B. A counter critic, on the other hand, may acidly contend. Will Lords have that page?
Yes, please proceed.
Yes. May acidly contend that if judicial interpretation uninformed by life's realities were to go wild, every home will not be a quiet castle but a tumultuous industry. Every research unit will get grind to a halt. Every god will face new demand, and every service club will be the venue of rumble.
You're reading where?
I'm reading page 25 in volume 5B. I want to keep both of them together. Paragraph 22
20,
at the top of that page.
23 is reproduced in the submission.
That's right. But I just want to
Not
read
that
para,
wanted to read para 22.
para 22.
Yes. So, yes, the counter critic.
Critic may, on the other hand, may acidly contend that if judicial interpretation uninformed by life's realities were to go wild, every home will be not a quiet castle, but tumultuous industry. Every research unit will grind to a halt. Every god will face new demands. What do you want? We read Bangalore supply. Yeah.
20, 23, 29, 31,
And every service club will be the venue of rumble, and every charity choked off by brewing unrest. And the salt of the earth, as well as the lowliest and the lost, will suffer. Counsel for the appellant struck this pessimistic note. Is it not obvious from these rival thought-ways that law is value-loaded and the social philosophy is an inarticulate interpretative tool? It is inescapable in any school of jurisprudence. Probably just Krishna had in his mind Maxim Gorky's The Mother, that talks about how the industrial class, and it's a very picturesque way. Now let me read these issues. Now let us itemize illustratively the posers springing from the competing submission so that contentions may be concretized. 1A, or establishments run without profit motive industries. B, or charitable institutions industries. C, to undertaking governed by a no profit, no loss rule statutorily, but otherwise doesn't fall within the definition of section 2J. Do clubs, other organizations like YMCA, whose general emphasis is not on profit making, by fellowship and self-service, fit in the definitional circle? To go to the core of the matter, is it an inalienable ingredient of industry that should be plied with a commercial object? 2A, should cooperation between employer and employee be directed insofar as it relates to the basic service or essential manufacturer, which is the output of the undertaking? Could a lawyer's chamber, a chartered accountant's office, a doctor's clinic, a liberal professions occupation, or calling be designated the industry? Whether a university or a college or a school research institute be called an industry? Is the inclusive part of the definition in section 2J relevant to the determination of an industry? If so, what impact does it make on the categories? Do domestic service drudges who slave without respite become industries by this extended sense? Are governmental functions stricto sensu industrial, and if not, what is the extent of immunity of instrumentalities of government? What rational criteria exists for a cutback on the dynamic potential and semantic sweep of the definition? Implicit in the industrial law of a progressive society geared to a greater industrialization and consequent concern for regulating relations and investigating disputes between employers and employees, as the industrial process and relations become more complex and sophisticated and workmen become more right conscious. As the provision now stands, is it scientific to define industry based on the nature, the dominant nature of the activity, that is on the terms of the work, remuneration, and conditions of service which bond the two wings together into an employer-employee complex? I think we should read all the three definitions.
Yes.
Vilash, kindly, before I go further on reading Bangalore water supply, kindly pick up volume 4B, where we have complete compilation of statutes, volume 4B. Its title Statutory and Documentary Materials.
This was the original, this is the amended.
It is amended.
You just read this now.
Original, it is amended. I know that. I think we should read this also. Then we go to look.
Yes.
Still handing it over. Still handing it over. Ultimately, they don't have it in this paragraph 10. Extract the original definite.
I know.
We step into the extracted paragraph 10. If they could.
You lost it. At page 427 of this compilation, volume 4B, we have both the original definition and the amended definition 1982, page 427. Industry means at the top of it. That originally it was 2J. Industry means, we'll also have that page.
It's 424 to
427. Volume 4B. Industry means any business, trade. I just, for the sake of argument, I just close my eyes for the other word, undertaking. I continue to read as if the word undertaking is not there for the time being. So industry means any business, trade, manufacture, or calling of employers, and includes any calling, service, employment, handicraft, or industrial occupation, or avocation of workmen. Now, in a large number of cases, what we will find, the word undertaking has come up for consideration, both in the context of municipalities and few other instances, the word undertaking has received a lot of attention. And therefore, whether it's a noster of sources or an adjustum generis principle, the court has employed either of them and said, I come to an understanding that undertaking must receive a widest import, whether or not there is a profit motive, a commercial element, and so on and so forth. That's why at the bottom of it, Bangalore Water Supply has reached that wide canvas. Now let undertaking remain there as it is. At the same page, the amended act definition is also available. Now this is how it reads. Industry means any systematic activity carried on by cooperation between an employer and his workmen, whether such workmen are employed by such employee directly or by through an agency, including a contractor, for the production, supply, or distribution of goods or services with a view to satisfy human wants or wishes, not being wants and wishes which are merely spiritual or religious in nature, whether or not any capital has been invested for the purpose of carrying on such activity, or such activity is carried on with a motive to make any gain or profit and includes. I skip again for the time being this block labor A and B. Let's come to paragraph 140 of Bangalore Water Supply. Just to make a quick note, page 14, paragraph 140 in volume 5B, at page 73.
Page 73.
Page 73, page paragraph 140. That is the concluding part where the court endeavors to define industry as defined and explained in Banerjee as a wide import. A, where a systematic activity organized by cooperation between the employer and employee. The direct and substantial element is chimerical, but the production and the distribution of goods and services calculated to satisfy human wants and wishes, not spiritual religious, but inclusive of material things of services geared, a celestial beings making a large scale prasada food, prima facie, that's an industry. That's what the 1982 amendment tries to capture. And a little later, absence of profit motive or gainful objective is irrelevant, be the venture in the public, joint, private, other sector. Then true focus is functional. And 3D, organization, the trade business, it does not cease to be so and so. I come back to page 427. Then we see once this definition is more or less borrowed from this part of one paragraph 140, then to the extent what the court was anxious to know, whether the law is now to be on the lines we have debated, that's answered in 1982 to a considerable extent. But the 82 Act also excludes certain parts of the definition of industry. At page 427, after F1, 2, A, B, etc., there's the middle, but does not include. One, any agriculture operation, except that agriculture operation is carried on in an integrated manner with any other activity, and such other activity is the predominant one. Then explanation for the purpose of subclause, agriculture operation does not include any activity carried on in a plantation as defined in so-and-so Plantation Labor Act, or 2, hospital, the dispensaries, 3, educational, scientific research or training institutions, or 4, institutions owned or managed by organizations only or substantially engaged in any charitable, social, or philanthropic service, or khadi or village industries, or any activity of the government. This is important. Any activity of the government relatable to the sovereign functions of the government. It uses the word very carefully. Activities relatable to the sovereign functions of the government, including all the activities carried on by the departments of central government dealing with defense research, atomic energy and space, or any domestic service, or any activity being a profession practiced by an individual or body of individuals, if the number of persons also a body of individuals in relation to is less than 10, that takes care of clubs, associations, etc. Any activity carried on by a cooperative society or a club like body of individuals, if the number of persons employed so and so is less than 10. Now kindly turn to in the same volume at page 701. We have the definition in the new code.
Is there a comparative study made between what has been stated in the judgment with the 1982 amendment and between the 1982 amendment and the labor code?
There have been large number of
distinction.
There have been large number of discussions, consultations. There is a
Comparative study. It would be useful to the court.
I can place it. There is some consultative committee. There is a parliamentary consultative committee.
We have a chart that
That chart will be useful.
We'll place it.
will place the comparative chart.
We'll place all those material. I thought for the time being,
My lunch provided.
You keep it, there is no need.
701.
Yes, Mr. Tony, let's proceed further. 82 definition, we are not sure how much it is going to help you, as my brother has already pointed out.
That's
Will of the legislature
so this part of
became
this,
of the executive.
the first part of it is as it was in the 1982 Act.
Of Nepal.
Sorry.
There is
So at page 701, the definition of industry, the first part of it, I may call it, is parliamentary of the 1982 Amendment Act. And that's again para 140 of the Bangalore Water Supply. But then here, after that, but does not include, we also have a non-inclusion, exclusion clauses. But this exclusion clause is not the same as what 82 amendments ought to bring in. This is a little narrow, but I think it's also important to keep it in mind. So it says, but does not include institutions owned or managed or organizations only or substantially engaged in a charitable, social, or philanthropic service. And two, any activity of the appropriate government relatable to the sovereign functions of the appropriate government, including all the activities carried on by the department, central government dealing with defense research, so and so, or any domestic service, and any other activity as may be notified by the central government. I think the parliament has gone very advanced to say if from time to time if there is a need going by these principles and by any other principles which the state may consider important and relevant, may notify it. Otherwise, they may still say it can be an industry, it need not be an industry. Therefore, these clauses, of course, occur in many legislations, but in the context of a law like this, it has taken color from the other part of the definition. Therefore, that's the statutory scheme as it exists today. So, if keeping this in mind, let me take your lordships to the Bangalore water supply itself. That's volume 5B. The judgment begins from page 4. May I invite your lordship's attention to. I come. An introductory paragraph where the court finds page 19 of the judgment, paragraph 4. Though the tailoring of a definition is the sole forensic job in this batch of appeal, dependent on which perhaps a few thousand other cases await decision, the cycloramic semantics of the simple word industry and the judicial gloss on it in a category of cases have led to the avoidable glut of labor litigation where speedy finality and working criteria are more desirable. And this delay in disposal of thousands of disputes and consequent partial paralysis in the industrial life is partly blamable on the absence of mechanism of communication between the court and the lawmaking chamber. Cycloramic means a 360-degree panoramic view. That's what it means. Kindly turn to paragraph 18.
Okay.
13? Okay. Fine. Kindly turn to paragraph 13 at page 21.
These three elements are 13, 14, and 15, taken from hospital.
Yes. Look at the definition.
Yeah, look at the definition. Dictionary in hand, decisions in head, and constitution at heart. Leads to some sure characteristics of an industry, narrowing down the twilight zone of a turbid controversy. An industry is continuity, is an organized activity, either purposeful pursuit, not any isolated adventure, desultory excursion or casual, fleeting engagement motivelessly undertaken. Such is a common feature of a trade, business, calling, manufacture, mechanical or handicraft-based service, employment, industrial occupation, or a vocation. I find that these propositions have been picked up from Hospital Mazdoor Sabha and then earlier judgment in Nagpur Corporation. I'll come to them a little later. Then paragraph 14. Likewise, an industry cannot exist without a cooperative endeavor between employer and employee. No employer, no industry, no employee, no industry. Not as a dogmatic proposition in economics, but as an articulate major premise of the definition and scheme of the Act, and as a necessary postulate of the industrial disputes and statutory resolution thereof. An industry is not a futility but geared to utilities in which the community is concerned. And in this mutant world where law is now economic utilities, material goods and services, not transcendental files nor intangible achievements or the functional focus of industry. Therefore, no temporal utilities, no statutory industry is axiomatic. If society in its advance experience subtle realities and assigns values to them, jurisprudence may reach out to search collective good. Today, not tomorrow, is the first charge of pragmatic law. So and so we're confined to material, not ethereal end products. And these paragraphs 13, 14, and 15 ultimately get coined as a triple test formula in paragraph 140. Let me go to paragraph 18. And before I read paragraph 18, what, of course, obviously prompted the dialogue, the court says, the last few lines in paragraph 17, the betterment of the workman's law, the avoidance of outbreaks, blocking production, and just and speedy settlement of disputes concern the community in trade and business, goods and services are for the community, not for self-concern. Then para 18. The penumbral area arrives as we move into the outer other essentials needed to make an organized systematic activity oriented and productive collaboration between employer and employee. An industry as defined in section 2J. Here we have to be cautious not to fall into the trap of definitional expansionism, bordering on reductio ad absurdum, not to truncate the obvious amplitude of the provision, to fit into a mental mold of beliefs and prejudices of social philosophy conditioned by class interests. Subjective wish shall not be father to the forensic thought if credibility with pluralist community is a value to be finished. Courts do not substitute their social and economic beliefs for the judgment of legislative bodies. Even so, this legislation has something to do with social justice between the haves and the have-nots. And naive, fugitive, and illogical cutbacks on the import of industry may do injustice to the benignant enactment. Avoiding scilla and charybdis, we proceed to decipher the fuller import of the definition. Your Lordship knows scilla and charybdis means between two dangerous things, the devil and the deep sea. So avoiding scilla and charybdis, we proceed to decipher the fuller import of the definition. To sum up, the personality of the whole statute, be it remembered as a welfare basis, it being a beneficial legislation which protects labor, promotes their contentment, regulates situations of crisis and tension of production may be imperiled by untakeable strikes and blackmail lockout. The mechanism of the act is geared to conferment of regulated benefit of the workman and resolution according to a sympathetic rule of law of the conflict's actual potential between management and the workman. Its goal is amelioration of the conditions of workers tempered by a practical sense of peaceful coexistence in the benefit of both, not a neutral position, but restraints on laissez-faire and concern for the welfare of the weaker lot. Then a few lines later, this certainly does not mean that we should strain the language of definition to import into it what we regard as desirable in an industrial legislation, where we are not legislating de novo, but construing an existing act. Crusading for a new type of legislation with dynamic ideas and humanistic justice, an industrial harmony cannot be under the umbrella of interpreting an old imperfect enactment. The court thinks that 2J was an imperfect enactment. I only want to keep this in mind when you're going beyond the reach of 2020. The new enactment has come. So imperfect enactment has now been substituted with what Parliament thinks is a possibly reasonably good enactment. Then kindly turn to paragraph 21. A cynical jurist surveying the forensic scene may make unhappy comments. Counsel for the respondent unions sounded that note. A pluralist society with capitalist backbone, notwithstanding the innocuous adjective socialist added to the Republic by the Constitution, regards profit-making as a sacrosanct value. Elitist professionalism and industrialism insensitive to the worker menace and inclined to exclude a sound and fury of the labor unrest from its sanctified pressing by judicially deindustrializing the activities of professional men and interest group to the extent feasible. Governments in a mixed economy share some of the habits of thought of a dominant class and doctrines like sovereign function, which pull out economic enterprises run by them, come in handy. I thought these are very broad observation made. Now, the latent love for club life and charitable devices and escapist institutions bred by clever capitalism and hierarchy of so and so, I'm not placing so much of emphasis on these aspects because we are more concerned with the larger canvas. Now, the second part of exclusion in the new definition, the same exclusion in the 1982 definition as to those activities relatable to sovereign function will ultimately.
Already referred to by you.
Right. No,
28.
I come. And page 28, I'll read two paragraphs at page 28, para 28 and 29. The second, though trite guidance that we get is that we should not be beguiled.
27 first. 27 first.
Beguiled by similar words or dissimilar statutes, context, subject matters, or socio-economic situations. I think that's a very ideal call. And the same word may mean one thing in one context and another in different context. There's a reason why decisions on the meaning of particular words or collection of words found in other statutes are scarcely of much value when you have to deal with a specific statute of your own. They may persuade but cannot pressure. But why they say that in the previous page 27, paragraph 27, where the quote extracts from Banerjee,
26 is the extract and 27 the explain.
the quote begins to deal with Banerjee from para 24 onwards. But let me only quickly take your lordships to two extracts from Banerjee quote set out in paragraphs 26 and 27 at page 27. A panoramic view of the statute and its jurisprudential bearings have been projected there and the essentials of an industry decocted. The definitions of employers, Section 2G, industry, industrial dispute, workman, or a statutory dictionary, not popular parlance. It is plain that merely because the employer is a government department or a local body, and a fortiori, a statutory board, society or like entity, the enterprise does not cease to be an industry. Likewise, what the common man does not consider industry does not necessarily stand excluded from the statutory concept and vice versa. The latter is deliberately drawn wider and in some respects narrower, as Chandrasekhar Iyer J. has emphatically expressed. Let me read this paragraph. In the ordinary and non-technical sense, according to what is understood by the man in the street, industry as business means an undertaking where capital and labor cooperate with each other for the purpose of producing wealth in the shape of goods, machine tools, and for making profits. The concept of industry in its ordinary sense applies even to agriculture, horticulture, pisciculture, and so on and so forth. It is also clear that every aspect of activity in which the relations of employer and the employee exists or arises does not thereby become an industry as commonly understood. We hardly think that in terms of an industry when we regard, for instance, to the rights and duties of a master and servant, or of a government and its secretariat, or the members of the medical profession working in a hospital. It will be regarded as absurd to think so. At any rate, the layman unacquainted with the advancing legal concepts, what meant by industry would rule out such a connotation as impossible. There is nothing, however, to prevent a statute from giving the word industry and the word industrial dispute a wider and more comprehensive import in order to meet the requirements of rapid industrial progress and to bring about, in the interest of industrial peace and economy, a fair and satisfactory adjustment of relation between employers and workmen in a variety of fields of activity. And it's obvious that the limited concept of what an industry meant in early times was now revealed to apply the enormously wider concept is to make in various and varied forms of industry so that dispute arising in connection with them might be settled quickly, without dislocation, disorganization, so and so. A few lines later, the conflicts between capital and labor have now to be determined more from the standpoint of status than of contract. Without such an approach, the numerous problems that now arise for solution in the shape of industrial disputes cannot be tackled satisfactorily. And this is why every civilized government is thought of the machinery of conciliation officers, boards and tribunals for the effective settlement of disputes. So what was in the antechamber of the mind of the court was the rapid industrial progress and all possible emanation that may happen by rapid industrial progress, and therefore what should we do to address the questions of industrial peace. Now, the dynamics of industrial law, even if incongruous with popular understanding, is the first proposition we derive from Banerjee. Legislation has to keep in pace with the march of times and to provide for new situation. Social evolution is the process of constant growth, and the state cannot afford to stand still without taking adequate measures by means of legislation to solve large and momentous problems that arise in the industrial field from day to day almost. And now let me take your lordships further to paragraph 29, at page 28. Because look at how the pendulum has been swinging between, on the one hand, we knew industrial changes happening across the globe and ways and means of producing goods and making services available are also undergoing change. At the same time, para 29, we'd only add that a developing country is anxious to preserve the smooth flow of goods and services and interdict undue exploitation. And toward these ends, labor legislation enacted must receive liberal construction to fulfill its role. For when you talk about liberal construction, and where will you draw a line? Much later in the course of the judgment, even Justice Krishna says, how do you draw a line? It finds fault with the Hospital Mazdoor Sabha wanting to draw a line and says, how do you draw a line? So the drawing a line can be sometimes chimerical, sometimes it's like chasing a chimera. So I'll read a few more paragraphs of this and then try to place my comments. Paragraph 31. At the end, after I read many paragraphs from Bangalore Water Supply, they all ultimately towards encapsulating what is found in paragraphs 140, 141, and 143. Para 31. Absence of capital does not negative industry. Nay, even charitable services do not necessarily cease to be industries definitionally, although popularly charity is not an industry. Interestingly, the learned judge dealt with a point after enumerating typical municipal activities. He concluded, some of these functions may appertain to and partake of the nature of an industry, while others may not. For instance, there is a necessary element of distinction between the supply of power and light to the inhabitants of a municipality and the running of a charitable hospitals and dispensaries for the aid of the poor. In ordinary parlance, the former might be regarded as industry, but not the latter. The very idea underlying the entrustment of the duties and functions to local bodies is not to take them out of the sphere of industry, but to secure the substitution of public authorities in the place of private employers and to eliminate the motive of profit making as far as possible. The levy of taxes for the maintenance of the service of sanitation and the conservancy of the supply of light and water is a method adopted and devised to make up for the absence of capital. The undertaking of the service will still remain within the ambit of what we understand by an industry, though it is carried on with the aid of taxation and no immaterial gain and no immediate material gain by way of profit is envisaged. This is a very powerful statement, but I think I'll pause here for a minute because both city of Nagpur, which follows Banerjee, and Banerjee follows all those earlier Australian judgments, which go on to say that municipal activities need not be necessarily kept out of the purview of an industrial concept. Now, if today they kindly again read that paragraph, at the middle of the paragraph, the very idea underlying the entrustment of such duties or function to local bodies is not to take them out of the sphere of industry, but to secure the substitution of public authorities in the place of private employers. Now, we have a long history of municipal corporations, both in England and in USA, where there are private charters given to municipal corporations. You are a body of inhabitants, you have a corporation where you have some charter, you undertake all those activities. But when you move away from a private charter, where a body of inhabitants may do whatever they need to fulfill their needs, to a body created under law, with a certain constitutionally or legally created mandates, then would you not think that there is a paradigm shift in the very basis of removing from a privately managed affairs, which now being managed and discharged by public authorities? So there is somewhere, I find in the course of the discussion, both in the city of Nagpur and in Banerjee, the court falls for a consideration. Whether it's private or public, it does not matter. As long as it satisfies human needs and wants by whatever arrangement it happens, they would definitely fall within the scope of an industry. I'll take your lordships to Subbarao judgment in Nagpur a little later. So kindly now turn to paragraph 34.
to 44 is a reference to the domestic law at that time. 40 up to paragraph 44, the lordships are referring to the previous judgments of this court.
Yes.
Right.
And 45 onward, then there is a reference to the international viewpoint.
Correct. I thought I'm going to, for my purposes, I'm not going to focus so much on clubs and associations, etc. That's on a different footing altogether. My focus is primarily on these functions which will be now assigned to what constitutionally are legally mandated field of activities. And number one. And number two, where both the 82 court, I'm sorry.
Sense of democracy at the grassroots level in terms of the constitutionalism now.
For instance, we have the 11th and the 12th schedule. Panchayats and municipalities which are now called upon to discharge several public utility functions. So my focus mostly on that. But before I go that, I don't think the new code in any way, directly or indirectly, echoes, I may say that, echoes an anti working class stand at all. It says, it captures paragraph 140 very lucidly. At the same time, I want to take some kind of concern to say what would not necessarily fall into a definition of industry, the kind of sovereign function that, though it says activities relatable to sovereign function. The new code could have gone into Bangalore water supply or any treatise on what is sovereign function today, but it does not do that. It cannot possibly, a legislature could not have enumerated what for all times would be a sovereign function. And therefore it says sovereign functions, activities relatable to sovereign functions. Therefore that would be an outer fringe, the penumbra of sovereign functions, where an outer fringe of activities may also be so relatable and therefore would not be included. Therefore the new code I find as very carefully, guardedly phrased this definition. So please keep that in mind. And we go to paragraph. I want to read a few more paragraphs to find out why is there a common running thread. The common running thread, as we find in the ultimate paragraphs of judgment, is systematic activity, no doubt, no difficulty at all. Employer-employee, can't be any difficulty. And then if there is no profit motive, there is some issue somewhere. So when you come back to paragraph 140, where it talks about distribution of goods and services. So distribution of goods and services is a gray area where we can have a room for disagreement and what kind of services Suppose I have a ICMR, and then there are even rice research. So the areas of research where they are directly geared to a certain supply of services directly and indirectly, and to enhance, let us say, community health. We have hundreds and hundreds of programs today, both at the central and the state government level, towards child nutrition, and then, for instance, and maternity benefits, so on and so forth. I got a large number of the list of those programs. And they are meant to be in support of advancing many provisions in the directive principles of state policy. So we have those difficulties when you talk of production, distribution of goods and services. That's why I was trying to tell your lordships that the word undertaking has probably led to a large amount of discussion on whether some activity would be an undertaking or not. And there you again fall into the question of nocita sources, ejusdem generis. And let me please keep all that in mind. Paragraph 34 at page 30. In short, trade embraces functions of local authorities, even profession thus departing from popular notion. Another facet of the controversy is next touched upon, that is, profit-making is not a sine qua non of industry, functionally or definitionally, but these powers they in federal, municipal, so and so, considered an industrial, with empirical approval with the Australian High Court, considered an industrial legislation. Then I read it a little later, because when you talk about municipal city of Nagpur and Banerjee, this may have some bearing.
Para 44 Nagpur discussed.
38 and 39.
Yeah, paragraph 38,
44.
37 and also 38, because the court enters into a little dense domain of drawing lines, but then it does draw lines. Para 38. 1 minute. Yeah, para 37. The limiting role of Banerjee must also be noticed so that a total view is gained. For instance, analogous to trade or business cuts down undertaking, a word of fantastic sweep. Spiritual undertakings, casual undertakings, domestic undertakings, war waging, policing, justicing, legislating, tax collecting, and the like are prima facie pushed out. Wars are not merchantable, not justice saleable, nor divine grace marketable. So the problem shifts to what is analogous to trade or business. As we proceed the next set of cases, we come upon the annotation of other expressions like calling and get to grips with a specific organization which call for identification in several appeals before us. Fortunately, as we see the new code, it doesn't borrow the old code, trade, business, undertaking, etc. It now essentially takes into account what is available in paragraph 140. Therefore, post the new code, the question of what will be an undertaking need not deter the code unless by forensic ingenuity at the bar, we try to bring it back and say, well, undertaking can always be loomed large behind the definition of industry, even in the new code. So I read paragraph 38 now. At this stage, a close-up of the content and contours of the controversial words, analogous, etc., which have consumed a considerable time of counsel may be taken. To be fair, the pathfinding decision which conditioned and canalized and fertilized subsequent juristic humanistic ideation, we must show fidelity to the terminological exactitude of the seminal expression, use and search carefully for its import. The precise words are branches of work that can be said to be analogous to the carrying out of a trade or business. The same judgment is negative, the necessity for profit motive and included charity impliedly has virtually equated private sector and public sector operation and has even perilously hinted at professions being trade in its perspective. The comprehensive reach of analogous activities must be measured. I ask myself the question, is it possible for the court to have such a measure at all, except to a certain limited and agreeable extent, where there can be a broad agreement? The similarities stress relate to the branches of work, and more the analogy with trade or business is in the carrying out of the economic adventure. So the parity is in the modus operandi, in the working, not in the purpose or of the project, nor in the disposal of the proceeds, but in the organization of the venture, including relations between the two limbs, namely labor and management. I think that is why in the new code, this aspect of the definition, which is thought to be filled in here, is very wisely avoided. If you look at parity is in the modus operandi, not in the purpose of the project, nor in the disposal of the proceeds, but in the organization of the venture. So you can probably bring in many things by applying this very widely stated proposition. If the mutual relation, the method of employment, and the process of cooperation in the carrying out of the work bear close resemblance to the organization, method, remuneration, relationship of employer and employee, and the like, then it is an industry, otherwise not. An activity-oriented, not motive-based analysis. Is it, I sometimes wonder, with all humility to the learned judge, whether this not motive-based analysis is also a very sweeping proposition. Then we have paragraph 40.
Bench wanted you to-
That's the question of 44.
44, I come to. Paragraph 44 at page 34. But I think it's also useful to read in the previous paragraph at the top of the page 34, the previous paragraph 43. It begins like this, filling the gaps in the Banerjee decision and the authoritative connotation of the fluid phrase analogous to trade and business were attempted to these twin decisions. To be analogous is to resemble in function relevant to the subject as between like features of two apparently different things. So some kinship through resemblance to trade or business is a key to the problem. Is a guide star. Partial similarity postulates selectivity of characteristics or comparability, wherein lies the analogy to trade or business is then the query. As a quote further to get on into the query, I think the query is only partly answered. Because the query could not be finally answered at all. The query could be answered on a given set of factors which present, unless we have some fundamental postulates on which there can be no disagreement whatsoever as to what would constitute an industrial activity. That's why I think both the 1982 and the new code picked up 140, paragraph 140. So those postulates are very clear. In the context of a trade or a business or any similar activity, you will have a systematic activity, an employer and employee, and the production or distribution of goods or services. But then if you pick up any one of an isolation, then there could be a problem. If you look up in isolation only a production, distribution of goods and services without reference to the other thing, that could be a problem. If you close your eyes to the nature of the activity, sometimes that could be a problem. Therefore, these are imponderables which you cannot put into a box which you can seal them forever. Now let me read para 44, page 34. That Subbarao, with uninhibited logic, chases this thought and reaches certain tests in Nagpur municipality. Speaking for a unanimous bench, we respectfully agree with much of his reasoning and proceed to deal with the decision. If the ruling were right, as we think it is, the riddle of industry is resolved in some measure. Although foreign decisions, words and phrases, lexical plenty and definitions from other legislations were read before us to stress the necessity of direct cooperation between employer and employees in the essential product of the undertaking, or the need for the commercial motive of service, the community, etc., as implied inarticulately to the concept of industry, we bypass them but marginally persuasive. The rulings of this court, the language of the scheme of the act, and the well-known canons of construction exert real pressure on our judgment. And in this later process, next to Banerjee comes Corporation of Nagpur, which spreads the canvas wide and eliminates the expression analogous to trade or business, although it comes a few days after Hospital Madhu Sabha decided with the same bench. I feel that.
47, 48, and 51.
After quoting at page 45, or page 35, quoting from an ILO on freedom of association at the bottom, at page paragraph 47 at page 35. This divagation was calculated only to emphasize certain fundamentals in the international industrial thinking which accord with a wider conceptual acceptation for industry. The wings of the word industry have been spread wide in section 2J and has been brought out in the decision in Corporation of Nagpur. That case was concerned with a dispute between a municipal body and its employees. The major issue considered was the meaning of the much disputed expression analogous to the carrying on of a trade or business. We find that the text itself did not have that word. Therefore, when you want to read what the meaning of an undertaking, you have to find out some kind of a step book to find out what expressions, words, and principles can be used for the purpose of determining what is undertaking. Therefore, the major issue considered was the meaning of the much disputed expression analogous. Municipal undertakings are ordinarily industries, as Baroda Borough Municipality held. Just make a note here, Baroda Borough Municipality follows Banerjee. And even so, the scope of industry was investigated by the bench in the city of Nagpur, which affirmed Banerjee and Baroda. The court took the view that the words used in the definition of prima facie or the widest import and declined to curtail the width of a meaning by invocation of nociter sources. Even so, the court was disinclined to spread the net too wide by expanding the classic expressions calling, service, employment, and handicraft. To be over-inclusive may be impractical, And so, while accepting the enlargement of the meaning by the device of inclusive definition, the court cautioned. But such a wide meaning appears to overreach the objects for which the act was passed. It is therefore necessary to limit its scope on permissible grounds, having regard to the aim, scope, and object of the whole act. If therefore the court was looking at calling, service, employment, and handicraft not to be widely seen, I suppose even the word undertaking, which must take color from trade, business, etc., if you spread the net very wide. And for that purpose, you call what is analogous to trade and business. And therefore, that's a problem where this court tries to face and tries to answer in its own independent way. Then paragraph